Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the December session of the From the Bench virtual studio tour series. My name is Sarah Songer, and I'm the program and studio manager at San Francisco Center for the Book. And today we're thrilled to welcome Erin Fletcher of Herringbone Bindery as our guest artist. Erin Fletcher is the owner of Herringbone Bindery, where she crafts one-of-a-kind fine bindings and small editions for various clients and institutions. She first discovered a love for bookbinding while studying at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. This experience brought her to study bookbinding at the North Bennet Street School in Boston, where she graduated in 2012. She regularly teaches book arts workshops online and at venues across the US, and her work is regularly exhibited throughout the US and abroad. And with that, we'll welcome Erin. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thanks to SFCB for inviting me to talk at this series. I'm just going to share my screen with you guys. So give me a moment. All right. Can folks see that okay? Awesome. I'm really excited to share my studio space and talk about a little bit of my work with you all. I might repeat some of the things that Sarah said, but I am based in Austin and I run my private practice under the moniker Herringbone Bindery. For the past 12 years, I've been creating work for exhibits and on commission. My clients range from institutions, collectors, other artists, and just the general public. In addition to the studio work, I also teach a wide range of bookbinding structures and techniques, both online and in person. So today I'm going to just share some of that work with you and talk about my upcoming workshops. But let me begin with my studio. Um, so instead of kind of bringing you around the room with my laptop, I took some photographs of my studio space. So my studio occupies a room in my house, which means I have a really great commute. It is a small space, so I need to stay really organized in order to be efficient. And then I have some elements of my studio that move around, or I just move them out of my studio. So the image on the right, or excuse me, on the left is the view from my bench. The majority of tools are within hand's reach, either on the pegboard or in the back left-hand corner. I have a cork board that is facing me, and that has a big sign that says today, and it reminds me of what is sort of on deck for the day. I teach online, as I mentioned, and I do love watching movies while I work, so my computer stand is kind of a permanent feature on my bench. I have this rig on the left-hand side of my bench that I use to set up my overhead camera while I'm teaching, so it can kind of swivel in and out of place when I need it or when I don't need it. To the left of my bench is what you see on the image on the right. These are my lovely white flat files that I continue to decorate with stickers that I've collected over the years. This is where I keep pending projects, either client or personal work, and also like flat material, of course. On the shelves above it are some of my larger equipment. On the top shelf, I have my plow, my sewing frame, various finishing presses. On the bottom shelf are most of my finishing tools, my notebooks, and in the plastic bins are some kind of random art supplies, all organized by color. Organizing things by color is kind of my jam in my studio. On the wall are kind of just various things I've collected over the years, or artists have given me awards that I've won for my work. I went to Codex earlier this year as an exhibitor, so I kept some ephemera from that. The big wooden piece of equipment is my combination plow and job backer from Olive and Oak. I have a tabletop that sits on it, so when I'm not using it as either one of those tools, it becomes a second work surface for me. So here are opening my flat files to show you how I organize my leather. So I have a warm, cool, and a neutral drawer. Again, I love arranging things by color. It brings me a lot of joy to open up these drawers and see what I have. Color is really important to me and in my work, so it helps me a lot to organize things by color. The image on the right is sort of the view behind my bench. I have my cut trimmer. I have one nipping press in my studio, and then I have two other in other parts of my house. I also have a quick print next to the nipping press. And then kind of wherever I can store sort of other larger flat materials, I do. So between like my flat files and the wall, I have my 80 point board. I have a bunch of rolls of cloth behind the quick print, which is a little maybe hard to see in this image. The last sort of big piece of equipment I have or furniture I have in my studio is this wire shelf. So on the other side of this wire shelf is that pegboard where all of my tools are. I keep more rolled up material on one shelf, binders filled with notes from when I was a student at North Bennet. My Charfix is up there on the top shelf. The different colored crates are different client projects or personal projects that I'm working on. So smaller materials get tossed into these crates and then I can pull them out as I'm working on things. In the plastic bins below that, those are all the workshops that I teach. So I hold all of the models, the curriculum handouts, anything related to a workshop goes into a bin. So it's very easy for me to grab everything when I need it. On the bottom shelf, those two plastic bins are just filled with scrap paper, again, organized by color, so I can find things when I need it. And then the crate at the very bottom, when I teach online, I prep kits for the students. So all the materials get tossed into that one crate. So when I'm ready to ship it out, it's all in one place. And to take this photo, I'm standing inside of my closet. So anything that like I don't need on a regular basis is in that closet, or it's in our other guest bedroom, or it's in my husband's office. So I have definitely occupied various corners inside my house. I actually have a carton of Mohawk underneath the bed of our guest room. So wherever I can find space. So I want to shift to client work. I want to share some pieces I've made over the years that are kind of my favorites and to just show you a little bit of the range of work that I take on. So both of these are quarter leather bindings, but they're two very different structures. The book on the left is a single signature. So a slightly different structure. I had to make sort of a faux spine for this one to get that rounded shape. The title is tooled on in blind on the spine, and then the sides are covered in a marbled paper I made when I was a student at North Bennet. The binding on the right is a rebinding of the scarlet letter. So the title and the author are tooled on the spine as well. And then the A in scarlet is tooled in a like a matte red foil. These were two really fun projects to work on. The project on the left is an artist book by Laura Davidson, who's one of my favorite clients to work with, and I've been working with her for a really long time. I do a lot of boxes for her, and you'll see more of those in a second. But she provided me with the pages for this book, and then she also provided me with the decorative paper that was used for the covers. So I used the pages to create a drum leaf binding and then used like the Tumouche structure for the covers in order to use her decorative papers. And then she added that little detail on the spine. The project on the right was a small addition I did for my friend Jackie Scott. This was for her thesis project when she graduated from RISD. She provided me with the decorative fabric that I then turned into a book cloth. Before turning it into a book cloth, though, I did embroider the title of the project using her handwriting that she supplied me. And then her name was stamped below that. And this is just a flat back case binding. So I do a lot of boxes for clients as well. Some of them are more straightforward, like the one on the left, which is just a traditional rounded clamshell covered in leather at the spine. The title is tooled on the spine, and then there's also a stamped label on the cover. The box on the right is for another client of mine that I really love working with. He has this really great collection of ephemera from this family who were fly fishers. But this woman in this family, Kara Weir, was also a member of the Guild of Bookworkers. So the collection is like a really weird blend of fly fishing and bookbinding. So I get to make boxes that kind of are catered to whatever needs to go into it. So this one has a drawer at the bottom that held a few sheets of ephemera and then a deeper well on top for a few booklets, along with a photograph and an illustration that were mounted on the left-hand side. So coming back to work I've done for Laura Davidson, the book on, or the box, excuse me, on the left was a part of this series that she called Shelfies, where she created these accordion books. And they were illustrations of the spines of books in a collection. So this particular one was called She Cooks, and they were all of the books in her wife's cookbook collection. And so Laura would supply me with all of the elements that go into or on the box. And then I created these boxes. So they all looked the same. They just had different content in them. Wanderlust, which is on the right, was again another really fun project. It housed a round accordion book. So I put it in this French tray, so it's very easy to grab from both sides. But the really fun part about it was these little paper coins that she made that lived below the book. So they were in a little well and you could pop it out with a little string. And then the label on the front is just inlaid into the lid. Again, it was just a piece she supplied to me, a hand-colored letterpress label. So I want to switch now to my personal work, or work I create for exhibits, because that is the work I love to do the most. I'm going to start with this book I did in 2020 and then work up to 2024. This is, I think, one of my favorite pieces I have done ever. The content was just really fun, really whimsical. It was really great to try to recreate it in leather. So this particular binding is a half skin binding that has been hand painted, and then all the illustrative details are hand dyed goatskin onlays that were hand dyed. And so one aspect of this book that I was really excited to do were these paper sequins. I'd been wanting to do paper sequins for a really long time. And this was the perfect book for it. So let me go back. I have a little time lapse of setting up these little paper sequins that were laser cut for me by Sarah Pike. So I'm just setting them up, punching through them and the leather. And then they're getting stitched on with either a French knot or a single stitch. And then in a moment, I'll flip it over and you can kind of see what my projects look like on the back side. This is the interior side of that binding. I do a lot of paper doublures, so using paper rather than leather to cover the full interior side of the board. This one I tooled with a grid pattern and then added a tooled kind of plus sign in a matte gray foil in alternating corners. This is kind of on the opposite end in terms of the content, but this was a book I did in 2021. Small group of us, about 6 of us, were invited to bind a copy of Megan Rosenblum's Dark Archives, which is a book all about investigating the history of books bound in human skin. So a very macabre subject. It was a little difficult to read and to kind of figure out how I was going to create a design for it. But one particular case in the book was about this woman named Mary Lynch who, after she died, this is kind of sorry if this is too much for anybody. After she died, her skin was used to bind 3 books in her doctor's collection, and they were books on women's health. And I just was really disgusted by this story, and that kind of took me down a rabbit hole of finding other people who were mistreated by the medical field. So I created this landscape of mushrooms, and within the root system of the mushrooms are names of different women who have been mistreated by the medical field. So in the end, I am really happy with the way that the binding came out, and it was a nice project to be a part of. Went on display at the Mutter Museum, which was pretty cool. I don't think I'll ever have another binding at the Mutter Museum. And then when this book sold, proceeds to the binding of the sale went to fund scholarships for people of color in the field of bookbinding and book arts to kind of further their education. So that was a great project to be a part of. This is a binding I did in 2023. This is a book bound in buffalo skin, and all of the details on the front cover are handmade paper with beading and embroidery and pearl also. Haven't done a binding yet with beading, but this felt like a really good time to do it. This is a French book all about how to interpret your dreams. And so I wanted to create a design that kind of evoked a poster for a tarot reader or a seer. And it just felt really cool to do texture with pearl and beading. And so I have a couple of videos of just what the binding process looks like, or the covering process. The work that I do, the majority of the decoration happens before the leather goes onto the book, which I think makes the covering process like even more terrifying. I have to get the placement like perfect or almost perfect, or I have to live with whatever mistakes I've made. But it is a little different than working with just like a plain piece of leather, in that the leather doesn't expand as much. And I think it's because there's just so many holes in the leather from the embroidery work that I do. So I don't have to worry about stretching or things kind of being in a weird place to start. This is another time lapse. So sometimes I do decoration after it's covered, and that is pretty much tooling. So I didn't initially plan on tooling on this book, but it really felt blank once I had the leather on the binding. So I'm just using a very, very tiny triangle finishing tool and stamping or tooling through like a copper foil. And I'm also kind of re-upping the purple on the paper onlays. So this is the inside of that book. There's only one illustration in this book, and it's this weird game that you can play in the book where you start on a random open circle, and then you ask the book a question. And then based on your question, which I don't know how it knows what your question is, he's kind of like it's like a magic 8 ball in a sense, like you want it to tell your future. So you ask it a question, and then it will tell you 2 directions, go up or down or left or right. And then where you end up is the answer to your question, which I just thought it was really lovely. So I recreated that illustration on the paste down here on the inside. This is the only box I'm sharing for this type of work, but I always try to do a very creative, fun box for this type of work. And typically my bindings don't have the title on it, so the box usually does. This is the opposite for this book, but I wanted to do little icons for things that are dreamt about a lot by people. And so that was on the spine of the box. This was a binding I finished last year that I brought with me to Codex this year when I exhibited. This is the 7 Deadly Sins, and it includes wood engravings by Leonard Baskin. So the story of the seven deadly sins and Baskin's work is very dark, very macabre, and I just wanted to do something totally opposite to that for the binding. So I chose to make these sort of merit badges using the animals that are most commonly representing those specific sins. This binding is also covered in buffalo skin, and each of those badges are layers of handmade paper, goat skin, and buffalo skin. And then they're all embellished with colored pencil and embroidery. So peacock is pride, which is the most egregious of all the sins. So it is the largest of the badges. And all of the sins stem from pride. Pride leads to all the other sins. And so that is what those little whipped stitches are coming out of the peacock badge. This is the interior of that binding, again, kind of keeping with that candy colored palette, being very whimsical. It has those paper doublures here kind of stamped in with a confetti of shapes and colors. And then the leather hinges come up onto the doublures and they're hand painted with these horizontal lines. This was a binding that I made earlier this year for the Society of Bookbinders International Bookbinding Competition. It is a miniature book and it won a prize for the best miniature. It is The Story of the Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen. The box is up on the left corner, and then the book is in the right side, and it's the chemise is what you're seeing first, and then the binding. So this is a story about a girl who tries to free her brothers who have been cursed to turn into swans every night. And she can do that by knitting them shirts in total silence. And she has to transform this plant that causes her to bleed into the fiber. So I can't remember if it's a stinging nettle or if another type of plant. But anyways, the leaves of this plant are represented on the chemise. Um, and then this is the binding. It is a knitted boards binding that I learned earlier this year, and it was just perfect for this particular book. The covers are knitted with a dyed paper yarn that I painted with some other tones of green. And then the book is also sewn on the same paper yarn, and you use the sewing supports to attach the covers. This is the last piece I want to share with you guys. This is a collaborative piece that I did with Gabby Cooksey for the Guild of Bookworkers exhibit Night Circus, which just closed in Boston, but will be traveling to Atlanta next. This is not a book, it's actually a wall piece, but we used all the same techniques that we would use on a book for this piece. So Gabby and I were really influenced by kind of recreating a circus poster and specifically using the tattooed lady as our star. She is literally tattooed. Gabby tattooed all of the black lines you see on the lady and on the goats were tattooed onto goat skin by Gabby. And then well, I'll hold off in a second. She gave those to me, and then I created her outfit in the background. But I just want to point out that we pulled elements from different binders from the past and who are our contemporary influences to tattoo our tattooed lady. And they're all binders who are women who have inspired us in our own work. So here are the pieces that Gabby sent me. I cut them out and mounted them. And then certain parts of the lady had to be cut so it would make sense for how like her hand would sit on her panties, or how her hand would sit and interact with the goats. So here I am making her bottoms. It was kind of fun. It kind of felt like I was working with like a big paper doll, but I was constantly taking photos and sending them to Gabby since Gabby is in Washington and I'm in Texas. So here is a quick time lapse of how I created the banner on the top. So it's mostly handmade paper with one piece of buffalo skin. Just kind of building after I cut all the pieces, building up layer by layer. So all these pieces were built up first and then glued to the green buffalo skin, and then they were embroidered. Here's another quick time lapse of stitching the flowers. So the flowers were very much inspired by the work of Teeny Mura, who I just think has always been so fearless in her use of color and has really inspired my work. Um, there were kind of four sets of flowers. So each of the flowers were stitched in a different way, but they mirrored each other on each side. And I just want to end by just kind of promoting my workshops. My winter spring season is up. I am teaching an in-person class in Boston, which is sold out, but you can add yourself to the wait list. But the three that you see on the screen are all online classes. So my box series class, where we learn these three different box structures. The sewn boards binding is Gary Frost's binding design. So we do his kind of classic binding style, and then we play with three other ways of covering. And then the limp vellum is hosted by the San Diego Book Arts. So with that one, if you've ever been curious about working with vellum or working on a sewing frame, then that is a really fun class to take. And you guys can find more information about my classes on my website. But thank you guys so much for coming today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Erin. That was really cool to see. I loved your time-lapse videos. It's so helpful to see. We got a question about whether you use a sewing machine, and then a very quick follow-up. Now I know. That answered that. So, and to that end, where did the embroidery, it's obviously such a big part of your work, where did that come from?
Yeah, I will say quickly about the sewing machine. I don't use a sewing machine in my work, but you can use a sewing machine on bookbinding leather. And if you're curious, you should look at the work of Hannah Brown and Sue Doggett. They also are making incredible embroidered bindings, and they do use a sewing machine often in their work. Um, Embroidery for me is kind of one of the first creative things I ever did. I really loved doing cross stitch as a kid. So I would buy like the pre-made kits, and I just loved like the planning of it and like counting out like where the stitches needed to be and then like crossing things off as I had finished them. It was really great for my left and my right brain. So um, I'd studied fiber art when I went to the School of the Art Institute, and that is also where I found bookbinding. So, it would make sense that eventually those two worlds would kind of meld together.
Ah, and I'm just taking these as they're coming in or have come in. So as a design binder, you're known for your own work and your own artistic creations. When you're collaborating with a client, how much are you taking direction, or is it a collaboration, or do you insist on doing your own vision, or how much direction do you take?
Yeah, it's really gonna depend on the client. Sometimes I'm given free rein, or maybe I need to come up with a couple of different designs, present those to the client, and then they can sort of choose what they like, or maybe bits and pieces of what they like. For addition projects, I feel like it has been more of a collaborative process. Like when I've done projects for 21st editions, there are a lot of different makers involved with that, with the paper making or the printing, or the content needs to come to the outside of the binding. So there are a lot of discussions that are having and a lot of prototypes that are being made. So I would say it really varies, and I think it's great that I can kind of experience all spectrums of making in that way.
Thanks. I'm sorry to say we were getting lots of comments and people really impressed with your organizational skills. I am also very impressed, a little bit jealous, and I'm thinking about incorporating color into my systems. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up on time today, so we won't get to all the questions, but thank you all for coming to this last event of 2024. We'll be back in February. We're taking January off because it's the 2nd, and we know everyone will just still be on vacation. So happy New Year and holidays to everyone. And we're going to keep this going in 2025. So we hope we see you then. Thank you, Erin, for taking the time to make this incredible presentation for us all today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here.
Bye, everyone. Until next time.